Whenever I teach English, whether that's A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2, this is one of the most common things that happens. So today's lesson, 1 dog, 2 dogs. For 2 or more, add S. What's your question? After box, 2 boxes. Why is it ES? Oh, that's because it's an exception. One of the most common things that happens to me is I get asked about the exceptions to the rules. And quite rightly, because to reach an advanced English grammar level or advanced English speaking level, you need to know the exceptions and be able to use them in your everyday English speaking and English writing. I'm going to teach you 20 in this video that you may not have come across before. Number 1, get for the passive. If you go to school and you do really well and you behave well and you're kind, you can become the head boy or the head girl. And if that's you, you might say this: I was chosen to be the head schoolgirl. This is an example of the passive. Someone else chose me. Something happens to the subject. We form this by using the verb to be and then the past participle. And this is what normally happens with the passive, except when we use the verb get. This girl could also have said, I got chosen to be the head schoolgirl. Now, why do we use the verb got instead of to be? Well, it's when we imply involvement from the subject. Now, the normal rules of the passive still apply. Someone chose the girl. But the girl did lots of good things that influenced that decision. So although someone else chose her, she was a part of the process. She was involved in what happened. And that's why we can sometimes use get instead of to be for the passive. Secondly, there is with plurals. I get asked about this all the time. Have you ever thought about this yourself? Because the usual rules are like this. There is a dog, meaning 1, and there are cats. In the picture I showed you, 2. And that's because we normally have there is with singular nouns and there are with a plural. But that's not how it works in real life English, because there is this exception. Many native speakers, if you listen to English enough, you'll notice that they use there is with a plural. I think I've done it in my videos. So you might hear something like this: there's cats everywhere in this city. And many of my students say, Rupert, shouldn't it be there are? Well, technically, yes, but in actual use of English, no. Because theirs can be used with plurals when you're speaking informally and you're describing a range of things like they are one. So when I say there's cats everywhere in this city, I'm considering everywhere in this city to be one thing, and there just happen to be cats in that situation. So in that way, when we're being informal, not for professional writing, we can use there is contracted to theirs for plurals. Number 3 is will have. Now, I produced a video a year ago testing people on advanced English, and I included this exception in the video. And I still get comments every single month from people saying, Rupert, you are wrong. Will have has to be only used in one way, like this one. By June, I will have been making videos for 4 years. This is the future perfect. This is the general rule for why we use will have followed by a past participle. The past participle here is been. It means that at a time in the future, something is accomplished between now and that time. And yes, that's how we usually use will have followed by a past participle. But my exception, and you won't find this in every grammar book, is this. We can use will have with the past participle in a present perfect sense. For example, I expect you will have seen my most recent video. If you're a subscriber to this channel, I can say that to you with confidence. I expect you will have seen my most recent video. And this is not talking about the future at all. This is talking about something that I think will be true before now. How could this be possible? I've always been taught will, have, and past participle is for the future perfect. Well, let me explain. It's to do with the fact that will has many meanings. Now, we often use will for the future, but we can also sometimes use will for other reasons, such as for certainty or confidence. And will have can be used for the present perfect when will means certainty or confidence. In my second example, I expect you will have seen my most recent video. What I'm saying here is I am confident that you have seen my most recent video before now. I believe this is true. I have certainty. And this time I'm using will not for the future, but to indicate my certainty and my confidence. Number 4, not at the end of sentences. We're normally taught that not works like this. Does it always snow in the UK? I do not think that's true. Or you can contract it in speech to I don't think that's true. Now the order here is subject, which is I, then the auxiliary, which is do, then not, then the verb. And that's the typical word order for using not. But there are some exceptions which you need to know about. Sometimes we use not after the verb. For example, I think not. Other ways that we can use not after the verb are like these. I hope not. I'm afraid not. And in shortened sentences, which are not really sentences but just quick answers, with certainty adverbs. Probably not. Definitely not. It's something we do in speech. Rather than use a full sentence with the auxiliary and not, we switch the order and we put not at the end, but only with certain phrases like the ones I've shown you here. Number 5 is gone and been, and I get lots of questions about this in the classroom. Do you know the difference between them? Gone is typically taught as the past participle of go. Infinitive go, past simple went, past participle gone. Like this, I have gone to the shops. And that's the general rule. But we can do something else with go as well. We can use the past participle been instead of gone. I have been to the shops. I have gone to the shops. I have been to the shops. 2 past participles for go. So what's the difference? Well, if you've gone, you are still at the place. If I say I have gone to the shops, I'm still there. I'm still in the shopping centre. But if I say I have been to the shops, then I have returned from the place. I went to the shopping centre earlier today and I came back. It's completed. 6 is apostrophes with S, and this can cause so much confusion. This is Rupert's car. It's a rather old car, isn't it? And this follows the general rules for singular possession. If you have a noun or a person's name and there's possession attached to that name, then we add apostrophe S. I say this is Rupert's car because it belongs to me. The car belongs to me. It's Rupert's car. Apostrophe S shows that it belongs to me. But it can get complicated because if the name ends with S, then you have 2 choices. Either you can add another apostrophe S, such as in this is James's car, or you could just add the apostrophe with nothing else. And we have this is Chris apostrophe car. Although when we speak, we would still say this is Chris's car, but in writing, we sometimes drop the S. How do we know when to drop this S then? Well, S apostrophe is particularly common with ancient names. So if you take Moses, who is a figure in the Bible from 4,000 years ago, a famous ancient person finishing with S, then you'll normally find this written as Moses, Moses, apostrophe, but no S afterwards. So it's particularly common with ancient names. But there is also a trend to become more like that in general, so that names are more commonly being written like the example with Chris you can see, rather than the example with James. What does that mean for you? It means when you read, be prepared to see either version. When you write, you have a choice. I recommend that you probably stick with the James example, except with these ancient names where you don't add that S. And be aware that things are changing. So if you do use the apostrophe without an S afterwards, you're probably not going to be marked as wrong anymore. 7 looks at the verb dare. But dare is interesting because dare can be a modal verb. Look at the person in this picture. What is he doing? Have you ever done this? Do you want to do this? Me? No, I think not. Not for me. What did he do? Well, he dared to do a bungee jump. Dare means that he did something that was scary to do for some reason, but did it anyway. You can dare to do something yourself, or you can dare someone else to do something. If you dare someone else, it means that you try to persuade someone to do something that's scary for them. But he dared to do a bungee jump. That sums up the picture that you can see here. And this is the normal use of dare when it is a statement. It's just like any other verb. He dared to do a bungee jump. Dared, which here has the past simple form. But things change when dare becomes negative or a question. He didn't dare do a parachute jump. Do you dare jump out of an aeroplane? Notice here that dare is not followed by to. He didn't dare do a parachute jump. So here dare is following the qualities of a modal verb. It's modifying the verb afterwards. We don't have to after it. And a further exception, you can also use dare as a modal in a statement before some reporting verbs. For example, I dare say that this is a difficult lesson. So really, what I mean is I say that this is a difficult lesson, but I dare to say it as well. And when we have these reporting verbs, or when we are using verbs associated with reporting speech, we can stick dare in front of it as a modal. Number 8 looks at adjectives that start with a and are completed with the form of a verb, such as these ones: asleep, awake, alive, afloat, alight. Take the a away and they all become verbs. Sleep, to sleep. Wake, to wake. Live, to live. Float, that means you're on top of water. And light, you can light something. And we can add a to them to make them adjectives. Something odd happens with these adjectives because we only use these particular adjectives after verbs, but we don't use them before nouns. Compare. The boy was asleep. Here, asleep is a complement describing the boy. The verb is was, asleep comes after was. But we can't say the asleep boy. We need to use another adjective if we're going to describe boy. And we could say sleeping boy. Sleeping here describes the boy. Now, this is another one where I get lots of questions. Using will in the if clause. Now, we're normally taught that you don't use will in the if clause. For example, if you help me, I will finish faster. This is a typical first conditional sentence. We have the if clause, which contains the condition, if you help me, and then the outcome clause, the result clause, I will finish faster. If the condition is fulfilled, you help me, then the outcome will happen. I will finish faster. If clause, clause with will. But there are occasions where we can put will into the if clause as well. If it will mean you finish faster, I will help you. Now, to many of you who've learnt English for many years, this will feel wrong, but it is possible. It doesn't happen a lot, but it can happen. Why? Follow this closely. When will is in the if clause, the outcome is also part of the condition. The two things must both occur for the speaker to agree to do it. So let's compare the first example again with the second example. In the first example, if you help me, I will finish faster. Condition in the first clause, outcome in the second clause. Now the second example. If it will mean you finish faster, I will help you. Here the condition is everything. You start with the last clause, I will help you. That has a result, which is the first clause. You finish faster. So in this case, the condition is not just one clause, it's both clauses. The two clauses both need to occur. I will help you, you finish faster. If both those two things are true, then I will help you. So the condition is actually all of it together. The last part followed by the first part. And I'll only do it if both the two things are true and both happen. And that is how we can use will in the if clause. Let's move on to number 10. Using can't instead of must. Here we can see a house with the lights on. If we're wondering if someone we know is in the house, when we see the lights, we'll probably say this. They must be at home. The lights are on. And this is the general use of must. Must can express absolute certainty when using deduction. It's one of the many uses of must. We're familiar with must being used for obligations or instructions or strong persuasion, but we also use must for deduction. We think about something and we say that something must be true if we are certain something is true based on evidence. And here we have evidence, the lights are on, so they must be at home. But what about if we try to use it in the negative form? Well, we can't. In the negative, we have to switch from mustn't to can't. Instead of saying they mustn't be at home, the lights are off, we have to say they can't be at home. The lights are off, which doesn't make much sense to us because can is used for possibility and ability, not for certainty. But in this case, it is. If you say mustn't, that means there's a rule not to do something, and we can't do that. So we use can't instead of mustn't. 11 looks at the difference between could and be able to. This is something you'll encounter at an intermediate level of English. And that is that we use be able to instead of could when there are instances of past ability. For example, yesterday I was able to finish my project for school. It was just one instance in the past, so we don't use could. We can use could for general past ability. When I was younger, I could run very fast. That was generally true throughout my childhood. But this is just one instance of ability in the past. We don't use could. And that's what's typically taught at an intermediate level. But what I don't hear being taught so much is the next part. And that is when we make this negative, we could use could or be able to. I couldn't complete my maths exercises, or I wasn't able to complete my maths exercises. Note here that wasn't able to is together and couldn't is not followed by to. Couldn't is on its own. I couldn't complete my maths exercises. But the point here is that the rule where we use be able to instead of could only applies for instances of past ability when it's a positive statement. You can use couldn't when it becomes negative. Here's another exception. May well. If you learn the phrase may well, then you'd probably say this if you look at the picture behind the words. It may well start raining soon. Look at the clouds. And that's because may well generally means a good possibility. But something changes unexpectedly if we add the word as in the middle. When we say may as well, we mean take this action. It's raining. We may as well stay at home. What does this mean in more detail? We use may as well when our original plans don't succeed, and we decide upon the action to take instead, even if this is the same action as already planned. Let me unpack that with the example. So we had plans to go out. Let's imagine we had plans to go for a long walk. Then it starts raining, and we decide because it starts raining that our original plan was no longer a good plan because we don't want to go walking in the rain. So we use may as well to introduce what we're going to do next because we had a plan, the plan hits problems, so now we think of something else. And that something else is we may as well stay at home. Here's the new plan because the old plan had a problem. Now, it could have been possible to say we may as well still go for our walk because it's better than staying at home, but may as well indicates that new response after a plan that doesn't work out. Semi-modals with negatives often work in a particular way, but there is one key exception. Have you ever met someone important, like a king? Normally, people would say if you want to see a king, they would try and stop you coming. They might say, you needn't come, or you ought not to come. The king is busy. And this is because we make semi-modals negative through N' or not. Remember, they're semi-modals because they're followed by to, need to, ought to. You needn't come, you need not come, you ought not to come. But there's an exception to this, which is with had to. We would not say, I hadn't wake the king from his sleep. Hadn't would be wrong here. Instead, we need to say, I had to not wake the king from his sleep. Now here, had to not is a requirement not to do something in the past. So I'm talking about the past. Perhaps it's a story I'm telling about when I was working in the king's palace and there was a requirement not to do something. What was that? Don't wake the king. I had to not wake the king from his sleep. It was a requirement put on me. State verbs are verbs such as be or have that describe the state of something. They don't tell us the action. For example, my city has 3 large parks, like the one you can see behind the words. Now we've used has here, meaning possession of the city. The city, 3 large parks belong to the city. They exist in the city. But we would not say my city is having 3 large parks. And that's because we don't add ing to state verbs. Or do we? Because there are some exceptions to this rule. For example, I'm having dinner with friends tonight. So here we have the verb have in the ing continuous form. And we have these exceptions to state verbs when the meaning of the verb changes. For example, here, to have means an arranged activity with other people. And other examples could be having a party, having dinner, having a wedding in our church. Here, having is to do with an arranged activity, not to do with something belonging. What are contranyms? This comes from the rule that words can be positive or negative, but not both. So if I say it's an awful day, it's definitely negative. If I say it's a beautiful view, it's definitely positive. That's always the rule, isn't it? Well, not completely, because there are some exceptions. And these exceptions are called contranyms, like the verb sanctioned. Compare these two sentences. We sanctioned a day off work. They sanctioned a country. When we say we sanctioned a day off work, we mean we allowed, we permitted. But if we say they sanctioned a country, that means that they put rules on that country, like a penalty. So one is positive, allowing something to happen. The other is stopping something from happening. There's absolutely no change in the verb. How do we know whether it's positive or negative? Simply by the rest of the meaning in the sentence. And these are called contranyms. And these can be difficult when you're reading because you have to work out if we're using the positive meaning or the negative. Here's a few other verbs that can be contranyms, other words as well. Bound, that means you can tie something up. Or it could be an animal bounding freely in a park. Clip, you can put things together with a clip, or you can cut things off. If you dust, that could mean you're removing the dust from a table, or it could mean you're sprinkling dust, perhaps of sugar, on a cake. Hold up, oversight, and resign are all words that can have these positive or negative meanings in different situations, although with the last one, there would be a pronunciation change. When you resign, that means you leave, but if you resign, then you go back to where you were. By is normally followed by an article, like in this sentence. I walked by the road, which here it means next to. This follows the typical rules for prepositions. By, article, noun. By the road. But there is one big exception when it's followed by modes of transport. I went by bicycle. With modes of transport, leave out the article. Go straight to the mode of transport after by bicycle, by train, by boat, by plane. And this is a similar rule with at in some situations. At followed by the article. Normally, we have the same rules as by. At the town square, like the one you can see here. I'll meet you at the town square. But there are some words where we don't use the article. And these are some places with a focus on what happens there. I'll meet you at school. Why don't we use the here? Well, this only applies to certain words where they focus on the activity rather than the place itself. So in this example, school focuses on the activity of studying that will happen there, rather than on the building itself. I'll meet you at school. Really, I'm talking about I'll meet you at the place we're going to study in. If I say I'll meet you at the school, then I'm thinking about meeting you outside of the school. The school is simply a place where I will meet someone else. But if I say I'll meet you at school, then I mean that I will meet you while I'm within this place we call school, where I'm doing some studying. There's a few words where this works. It doesn't work with all words. At hospital, at prison, at work, at church. But it doesn't work for words with similar meanings, actually. So you could not say, I'll meet you at mosque. It would need to be, I'll meet you at the mosque. And also, this is not just limited to at. This rule stays the same for other prepositions. So we can also say in school, to school, for school. In work, to work, for work. and so on. The historic present is all to do with storytelling, but not in the way you would expect, because the usual rules are to use the past simple. This lady has met someone famous. And sometimes when we meet famous people, maybe not we, but another person, we try to take a selfie to show that we were there with that person. And then when we tell the story afterwards, we should use the past tenses because it's a past story. I entered the building and a famous person stood there. Entered, past simple, stood, past simple. But there's an exception. We could also use the historic present to tell exactly the same story. I enter the building and a famous person stands there. How can it be that after all these years of being told not to use the present simple for the past, how can it be that you're now telling me that I can use the present to tell a past story? Well, it's for particular effect in storytelling. The storyteller in the second example uses the present tenses to give the listener a feeling of being there. So I deliberately choose the present tenses to make it feel more immediate, to try and get the person listening thinking of a picture in their mind of what's happening as if it was now. So don't get me wrong, the past simple is the main and the usual way that we tell stories. But you can put the historic present in there sometimes if you want to create this effect on the listener. To followed by the ing form. This is usually not allowed. Isn't that right? In this picture, you can see a policeman who stopped a woman for this reason. She tried to take a chocolate bar from the shop. And this follows the normal rule, which is that when you have to and then a verb after it, that verb has the infinitive form. She tried to take. Take is the infinitive. That's what normally happens. Well, not always. There are a few verbs where we actually have to followed by the verb followed by ing. Again, this could be another surprise if you've read grammar books your whole life. She admitted to taking the chocolate bar. That is the correct way to form that sentence. We would never say she admitted to take the chocolate bar. It's always she admitted to taking the chocolate bar. Why is that? Because it's part of a few verbs where to is actually followed by the ing form. Look forward to, get around to, adjust to, confess to, object to. There's a few more, but those are the 5 main ones, where the verb is actually followed by to and then another verb with the ing form. And my 20th exception is for except clauses. Like this. They didn't talk except to say their names. We use the word except to introduce a clause which means everything but what I said before. So they didn't talk, they didn't say anything, but there was one thing that they did do, and that is they said their names. Now, with an except clause, normally we have except followed by to, followed by the infinitive, except to say. But there is an exception when do is actually the main verb, such as here. They did nothing except speak. Now notice here that did is not the auxiliary. There's no other main verb in the first clause. They did nothing means there were no activities. Did is the main verb. And because did is the main verb coming from do, then after except, we can have the bare infinitive, except speak. Now that's 20 exceptions in English, but of course there are more. How can you learn them all? Well, a lot of them are covered in my Perfect English Grammar course, which is suitable for all levels right up to the most advanced level of English, C2. You can get this course by clicking in the link below me in the video description. It's got 41 hours of teaching from me, 600 different videos, and in there you have lessons, practice tasks, speaking, and the ability to role-play speaking in real time, practicing the grammar rules. You can start the course today.